What's up, Mr. Chopra?
What's up?
It's
What's up?
Sunday. Madness the entire week has been for us.
Yeah.
I've started all the way from Canelo versus Saunders last weekend to having one FC Dangal this Saturday, Arjan
hmm
Bhullar, Ritu Phogat. And then I think there was one more fighter representing India.
Yeah.
And to UFC 262, which was again madness, especially
Crazy
for
stuff.
someone who's a Tony Ferguson fan and a Michael Chandler fan.
Yeah.
Let's get straight right to it.
Been a
Do
week.
you want to open up with? I'm actually like fresh off, like it's Sunday, right? I'm fresh off what's happened today, so I really
hmm
want to. I think we can start with what went down at UFC 262, but there's just so much we can probably point out over the entire week that's happened. How do
hmm
you want to have this conversation?
We should start with obviously the Indian event that happened on Saturday with ONE FC because we have a couple fights to focus on over there, which
I
were
think that's a conversation you'll have to lead of sorts because I am again not very familiar with the fights that go on in ONE FC. Plus, this was my first time watching a Ritu or a Arjun fight, but I'm a fan now. So
I mean, a huge event for Indian MMA. It's finally put us on the map, let's just say, in terms of MMA because until now we've had a lot of mixed fights at ONE FC. A few Muay Thai guys, a few wrestlers would go there, but didn't have a great result. This time, the way Ritu performed and the way that Arjun performed were like they look like contenders in the top 15. And Ritu unfortunately missed out on the atomweight tournament. I think that's happening next year or later this year at one. But she put on a stellar performance to get a split decision. That was like big news for India. Big news.
you've not had the chance to watch the whole Ritu fight yet, right?
Not the Ritu fight. No.
No, so I'll just give you a background of what I could understand from what went down. 3 rounds of madness. Movement by the ladies was a lot. Ritu, this was my first time, as I said, watching Ritu or even B.
Hmm.
So movement was on point for both throughout. I could see Ritu dominate for the first round or so because her wrestling was just very strong.
It was a
I
different
just
class of
feel
wrestling.
I just feel I think Ritu might have not had the split decision towards her because she took a lot of damage throughout the all three
Hmm.
rounds. Her defense was very low. She was great at wrestling. She was great at striking. Her defense was very low. She took a lot of shots, and that kind of wore her down by the end of round three, where it
Hmm.
sort of was more of controlling than being a part of the whole action.
Right. Yeah, I don't think she has the gas tank for those um, top contender fights yet, but that was still quite an impressive performance for Indian MMA to still even get a split decision after gassing out for 2 rounds. So I still think that's pretty
I
commendable.
absolutely loved watching her, though. I mean, One F. Like I said, it was the first time I was watching One FC. The whole programming, I wasn't the biggest fan of, but it's also probably because, like you mentioned, right, it was supposed to be a
Right.
much larger event, but the Singapore last minute lockdown restrictions sort of had to made One FC scale down the whole event. That
Mhm.
led to it being a very small event, and
Yeah.
but they pulled off great fights. I feel.
Yeah. Some
Talking
of the
about again
fights were like,
Ritu and B, phenomenal fight. I loved watching it. Unfortunately, Ritu didn't make it.
hmm
Hopefully, she comes back. And I think this was her first defeat ever. So
oh,
that's a big deal. That's a big
wow.
deal.
Yeah.
And congrats to Killer B and
Yeah.
the Philippines.
Yeah. The Philippine representation was good at that fight. It was Philippines versus India, basically,
Absolutely,
with
absolutely.
Vera and Arjun's fight also. And in that fight, I think, wow, Arjun put on quite a show. He brought out that inner DC in him for that performance. It looked like,
Can you, you mentioned, I think DC, Khabib, and Arjun have trained at the same gym, right? You
yeah,
mentioned this to me. I'd like to know more about it. Plus, I saw Arjun being congratulated by like apart from most of the journalists like Chamatkar Sandhu or Ariel Halwani, Khabib put out a story saying like
Yeah.
congratulations Indian killer or something like that.
Yeah, they have a picture together on Instagram. If you go back on Arjun's page a few months ago, or actually last year or something like that. But during Arjun's career, I think during his second fight in the UFC, he got the chance to train at AKA with, which is Khabib, Cain Velasquez,
Oof.
Beastie, Luke Rockhold. It's like the top of the food chain kind of gym. And Arjun got to train there, which is huge.
Huge.
Like, it's one of the meccas of MMA, you know. So, and he brought that for the fight, for this fight against Vera, which you could see he had like some upper echelon training and a game plan in place because he worked out that whole sequence to perfection. I don't think that fight could have gone any better for him.
There was a lot of elite level movement by Arjun throughout the throughout the 5 rounds. I mean, until he knocked Brandon out.
Yeah, he gassed him out.
He gassed him out. Yes, I really thought that it was too much explosion happening because, like, we know that it's very difficult to last for such a long time, especially
As
watching.
a heavyweight.
Yeah, especially as a heavyweight, right? So I was really impressed by the gas tank he had, the speed he had, and I would also point out the agility of Swords because there were a bunch of takedown attempts, and even like when on the ground, Arjan's just like very strong. And in the first round, right, Brandon was like trying to hit very decisive shots, but he took one or two straight fists to the face and he was rocked. So he realized he's also in trouble. It's not just someone he's messing around with who cannot cause any damage. He instantly identified the fact that Arjan can cause damage and cause a lot of problems, and that's what happened.
I would have never thought Arjan would have got the knockout, especially after watching his fights in the UFC and watching his first one fight. I didn't think he had the power, but he used it to perfection. The straights in the first round, and then coming into the second round when Vera was going crazy and Arjan became the more tactical sit back and counter fighter. I was like very, very, very impressed how he changed that striking into that wrestling as well. Superb.
And it was surprising. Absolutely, that's like a very big deal. But what I loved watching even more was that I mean, I don't know if it's true, but I guess most of the fighters coming out of India might have the perception that they're like someone who's someone who are proficient at wrestling. But Arjan went out for a straight up brawl. Like he took Brandon down.
Amazing. The fakes and feints to make Brandon hesitate so much during the striking in the first round. I've not seen that. I've not seen anybody do that to Brandon Vera, and it was amazing to beat someone who's like a 4-time champion in ONE FC. Outstanding from Arjun.
And he has all the eyes on him right now. I just wish he had been younger and probably would have had scope of like fighting for at least 10 more years.
Right.
Because after his win, he did cut a promo that kind of communicates that he'd want to move towards more of a pro wrestling situation.
He's a medal winner at the Commonwealth Games. He's an accomplished man already.
Mm-hmm. Agreed, man. It was fun to watch. I definitely tune into more of ONE FC's fights, considering how much they're promoting Indians.
That's a big part of it, and plus they have a lot of cool events where, like the co-main event was a straight Muay Thai fight. It wasn't MMA or it wasn't kickboxing. It was straight Muay Thai. So you had elbows, but no takedowns or anything like that. So it's always fun for new eyes in MMA because you learn all these different parts that go into MMA. You know.
Yeah, for sure. That was a brilliant card put together by ONE FC.
Good introduction for Indians to ONE FC.
Agreed. And it was a very neutral territory. So
yeah.
Definitely loved watching. As I mentioned, definitely going to watch more, and I hope Arjan does defend his title very soon because I don't think he's taken a lot of damage to have him straight up not defended for a long time. So I guess in the next 6 to 8 months.
Hopefully, he did call out a Korean MMA fighter in
Yeah,
his
yeah,
post
yeah,
fight
yeah.
as well. So hopefully that happens because I'd like to see Arjan fight in ONE FC again, represent India again as a champion.
Agreed. Let's move on to before we head out to UFC 262, where we literally there's I think I missed one of the early fights even on the main card. So there's anyway so much to talk about it, but I'd really like to highlight Canelo versus Billy Joe Saunders before that.
Right.
So have you had the chance to watch the fight yet?
I've just watched a bunch of highlights. I saw the finish. I saw the aftermath, but I haven't watched the whole fight. I haven't
Okay,
seen the
so
breakdown that Canelo's done.
so there was just so much hype around Canelo and Canelo's fighting him after beating Triple G, who supposedly was one of his toughest fights ever, and he did look human in that fight from what I had read and after watching a lot of highlights. And like after Floyd, I don't think anyone's given him that much trouble ever,
Right,
but he
right.
was
There was a
victorious.
perception that he was picking a lot of easy fights in the general consensus, but then when the news of Billy Joe came out, everyone was like, okay, this is probably the biggest contender he's fought since Triple G, since Floyd.
For sure, for sure.
Mhm.
For me, I watched like a few fights in the undercard as well, but none of those fights really generated as much as an audience reaction as the Canelo and Billy Joe Saunders fight did.
Right.
I feel the audience that was there watching the fight was like, I would say 80% of the people just came to watch Canelo, and I'm not even like exaggerating
Oh,
about it. You could see.
Canelo's a god in Mexico.
I loved how in the press conference, like pre-press conference, right?
Mhm.
Tyson Fury's in support of Billy Joe Saunders, rocking his Versace t-shirt, like shirt, and like
Mhm.
just roaming around, interacting with the audience. And
Right.
he was called upon to the stage just for a quick chat. And the interviewer was asked him like, "These are Mexican fans here, Canelo fans, and you've come from England to support Billy Joe Saunders. What do you have to say to them?" He's like, yeah, they are my people. They love me. And all of them started just cheering for him. So I love the guy. I love the
I
guy.
love Tyson Fury. He's amazing. I hope he has a good
Those are the
fight with
kind of champions we
Joshua.
need to have, right? I mean, I don't watch a lot of boxing, but in any sort of combat sports, we
Yeah.
need to have that personality because it adds a sellable value to the sport, I would say, in some way.
I mean, I don't even think that Tyson Fury is really hateful to anyone. Like he's not pushing anyone down. He'll still call you a good athlete, but he'll tell you how he's going to dismantle you.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think Tyson Fury is like the biggest star in boxing right
His
now. I
his
don't.
last fight with Wilder, he goes like, "Have you seen that?"
I don't think Anthony Joshua's got the same selling power that Tyson Fury has.
Absolutely not. No way.
Yeah. Even though
Especially after the last few fights, no chance.
mm,
So anyway, Tyson Fury was there supporting Billy Joe Saunders. He in fact surprisingly predicted Billy Joe Saunders knocking Canelo out. So I was quite like not either here or there. I was also like very excited for the bout. Then came the day I watched it live because I was so excited. Watched a bunch of
mm,
fights on the undercard, as I said, not very exciting until the last bout. The first few rounds. So again, like I said, this is the first. I would say one of the first times I'm watching a elite level boxing fight live.
right, right.
Uh, Put everything else before aside. I've watched a lot of Floyd highlights and so on. I've like watched even Canelo and Floyd highlights. So this was
Mm-hmm.
the first time I was watching live, right? So first few rounds. Firstly, boxing is 3 minutes of 12 rounds of 3 minutes.
Three
So
threes. I mean, sorry, 3 minute rounds.
yeah,
Right.
3 minute rounds goes up to 12. So I didn't really know what to expect in the first few rounds, but I
Mm-hmm.
would say until the round 6 or 7, we could see like the initial few rounds, Canelo dominated.
Mm.
A lot of people, Todd Grisham, like he used to be a WWE commentator. That's how I know him.
He
But
used to be a UFC commentator.
really,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I had no idea. But I've known
This is
him
a
from
very
his
small period.
I've known him from his WWE days, so I was surprised to see him. The subscription platform and the promoter, I guess, was Eddie Hearn, and runs something called Matchroom Boxing, and it was like broadcasted on DAZN. That's how you pronounce it, I guess. So
The
Todd
zone.
Grisham, yeah, DAZN, something like that. So Todd Grisham was calling out a lot of the facts during the fight that I kind of gauged and understood. The first few
Mhm.
rounds, Canelo was able to do a lot of damage, especially on the body. So Canelo is known for his body damage.
Yeah.
Those body shots hit you hard, and you don't realize until the championship rounds in a boxing bout comes. So first few rounds, Canelo dominated. Then I would say after the round 4 is when the whole momentum sort of shifted to Billy Joe Saunders. That's what I thought. That's what the audience watching thought.
Right.
But when it was time to reach round 7, I have no idea what happened. It was probably a game plan. And if it was, that was really genius of him to do it, of Canelo to do it. But he really started gathering the audience cheers together, started hyping them up, then goes on with these power punches and ends up breaking his orbital bone. And round 8, Billy Joe Saunders cannot continue, and there's
That's
a
championship
stoppage.
mentality for you. That's championship man. That's round management. Like if you've been in those deep waters, you know how to like manage a 12 round fight rather than doing a 7-8 round fight. Um, I think I think he definitely did take a break for those rounds in the middle because he what do they call shots to the body? It's money in the bag.
Hmm.
So it's always investment that you do in the start of the round, in the start of the fight, and it no matter what, it's going to show up in the later rounds. You're going to see those body shots come to work,
And
and they did.
Canelo's fighting style is a lot different. It's probably compared to uh, Julio Cesar Chavez and a
Hmm.
lot of other Mexican fighters. There's a whole Mexican stance that he takes. It's very difficult to gauge where the punches are going to come from, and when it
Mm.
hits you, it's just a power shot. Throughout the first few rounds, Canelo did so much damage, which was very concealed damage of sorts. No one watching would maybe be able to realize, but you could see Billy Joe Saunders probably get excited to till the round 7, and then suddenly realize, oh shit, I'm in deep waters right now. There's nothing I can
Right,
do about it.
right. And someone as good as Canelo, you don't. I'm pretty sure he must have fooled Billy Joe into thinking that he landed a lot of strikes as well.
Yes.
Because with the big boxing gloves, you can't really tell if you're hitting the body or it's like getting all the way through. And Canelo's defense is just
For sure, and Canelo's also known for his uppercuts, right? I'd watched a lot of highlights
mm,
where he's delivered the same shot, and that is like a deflection point for a lot of the fights. Wherever he looked human, as I said, right?
mm,
So kudos to that guy. It was
yeah,
unbelievable to watch him, and I learned a lot about boxing, how it is actually important to go 12 rounds and to kind of keep that composure. Similar to what Floyd did against Conor McGregor.
mm,
The first few rounds, Conor beat him, took some of the shots that I am assuming were illegal but not called out because it was a very exhibition kind of bout.
mm-hmm,
And towards the last few rounds, Floyd's coming in and beating him. Also, by the way, if you notice, that I'd watched an interview of Conor McGregor about this. Floyd, throughout his career, has always had like a mixed stance. I think he's southpaw.
yeah.
Yeah. But for that fight, after the first few rounds, when he realized Conor can actually box, that guy shifted to a Mexican stance, and that was a first for Floyd Mayweather.
Oh,
So that's got to talk about how different boxing styles. Because here, imagine in MMA or in like in any other sport, like any other combat sport, you need to be able to understand so much and land so much. Your technique needs to be strong. You need to be precise in doing things. You need to have a peripheral vision that's stronger than anything. In boxing, you have so much limited scope to do things. It makes it even more tough to land shots that actually affect your
mm.
opponent without having to break the rules of sorts.
It's
So
it's
you
two
need to be a
attacks
lot more
versus
intelligent.
it's 2 weapons versus 8 weapons. With 8 weapons, you just have to run. With 2 weapons, you have to be very, very tactical about it.
For sure. And so I think this fight made Canelo uh, get the WBC, WBA, WBO, and the Ring Magazine championships. The only championship left is the, I think, IBF championship that's held by someone called Caleb Plant.
Right.
And if
Which is
he
apparently the next fight.
Yeah, which is apparently the next fight is somewhere in September. If he goes on and beats the guy, he'll be the I think, if I don't know if
Unified.
I'm wrong, but he'll be the first ever to unify all titles in a super middleweight division.
Yeah, yeah.
So loved watching the guy. Definitely going to watch a lot of
Hopefully,
his fights.
yeah, gets remembered as one of the Mexican greats like Senor Chavez was, and hopefully he's up there after that.
Yeah, and he'd also appeared. I think this was a month ago on one of the Hot Boxing with Mike Tyson podcasts, and he did
Hmm.
mention that his mentality right now and his strength, or his I would say even technique, is far different from what he had, and experience also in terms of experience. Like he's a far better fighter right now than he was when he fought Floyd Mayweather. So a prime
Oh,
Canelo versus a prime Floyd, that's a fantasy fight that everyone wants to like kind
right,
of
right.
judge and score.
I think even I think there might be a Triple G rematch also on the table for Canelo, which Canelo I think wins by a landslide.
Not sure. I haven't watched a lot of the Boogeyman fights.
I
That's
mean,
what they
both
call
the
him, right? That's what they call him, the Boogeyman.
yep, drama show, big drama show.
So undeniably, P4P best fighter in like the best boxer,
Oh,
Canelo has to
currently,
be.
yeah, yeah, hands
Uh,
down.
has to be. Now let's move on to UFC 262. I really want to know what your thoughts were. Like I missed Burgos versus Barboza. Unfortunately,
What?
fight of the night. Yes, I did miss it live.
I
I caught the highlights. I know how the knockout went. I read about a lot of like the science behind the knockout. So I'll get
I
to it, but I want to
messaged
know.
you about this being a possible fight of the night yesterday. I did it on Friday. I let people know that it would be probably fight of the night. Wild fight. A wild fight. Oh, so much fun to watch.
Probably also because he beautifully cut weight, Barboza.
He finally got the formula right. Because last time he looked good, but he looked like he killed a part of himself last time. This time he looked like he was totally fine. He finally managed the weight correctly and everything. He looked great this time.
Take me through the fight. I caught some highlights, but I want to know like what were the
Uh,
first, like what are all the three rounds, right? I just saw the damage that was done. It was, I think, Barboza dominating throughout, and then that knockout.
Barbosa was dominating throughout the first round. He came out with insane low kicks. I think he landed four naked low kicks, and Burgos had no answer. Like immediately, by the second leg kick, Burgos' leg looked like it was shocked. It could barely bend right, and somehow Burgos comes through that and still charges forward. But Barbosa is quite used to having people rush him down. So throwing power leg kicks over and over again while on the back foot was amazing. The second round, though, I think did go to Burgos because he reached a point where he was pressuring Barbosa so much that Barbosa didn't have any room, and his boxing really came through over there in the close space. He was landing some good jabs. I think he checked one of Barbosa's leg kicks also that just opened a cut on Barbosa's shin, and he just stopped throwing that leg kick with his right leg, I think, for a while, and that became a huge turning point in the second round, where I thought maybe Shane could come back, but in the third, Barbosa reminded you that he was an ex 155er and he's fighting 145s now. So the power difference he's carrying from a higher weight class, like my God, it came through. That was a very delayed takedown and knockdown that happened.
Yeah, in the highlights, the round one to me looked. I mean, they highlighted the leg kicks that Barboza landed, right, and they were pretty fast. Even I heard DC call out the
Fastest
whole,
leg kicker in
like,
the
yeah,
business.
fastest leg kicker in the business for sure. And uh, f- uh, I think damage wise, it was all over the leg for
Hmm.
Barboza, but they were really fast, is what I could really like. That was the highlight for me.
He last he landed some nasty body strikes as well. Um, I think Burgos had like his skin started ripping because of the impact. of Barbosa's kicks across his body. But during that second round, that one check kick or something that happened to Barbosa's shin, he started hesitating with his leg kicks, and it allowed for Burgos to come back in the second round. But
Okay.
Barbosa, oh my God,
And it was
still
a
couldn't.
round 3 KO, right? Or
Round
was it
three.
round 3 KO? How did that round begin?
Um, Barbosa came out strong. He did what we were talking about with Canelo. He took a little break for the second, and third, he was like ready to jump on the racehorse, ready to sprint a mile and leave you in his dust because he came out hot and hard, landed some very good strikes, and I mean the knockout came out of nowhere initially because you thought Shane was totally fine because he was still stuck in the stance, and then you suddenly saw him fading and his lower body starting to give way. It was a very strange knockout. Never seen anything like that.
I read about how the knockout really went down from a very scientific point of view. The delay, what really caused the delay. So apparently, when you have fists that hit your head, the brain generally has potassium, but every time it takes damage, it releases glucose to kind of reverse the damage of sorts. So the more damage you give, the lesser the potassium, and it reaches a point where your brain has to shut down to sort of preserve like the whole
Hmm.
neural system. I think I don't know what you really call it, but it has to preserve itself, and that's when it really shuts down. So probably when Shane landed those, when Shane got those fists, like I think it was very aggressive throughout the whole round, but by the time the knockout, reached the point of knockout, it like Barboza had landed so many of those shots, and probably that's when Shane had to take a step back, and then everything shut down, lights out.
I mean, I think he did get a concussion because it was just a delayed concussion. Because after Barbosa was taken off him, I could see Shane's toes curling and everything. So I think it was just a very very delayed concussion that he got. That was an insane fight. I don't know how you missed that. You better watch the whole thing if you can.
Where do I watch this?
I, Fight Pass.
I don't think they immediately have.
Oh
I
no,
think Sony.
you'll have it on Sony, no?
Yeah, I have Sony Live. I think I'm going to.
The whole
Reach
card
it.
is there for free. If you can, I mean, even the prelims, the early
Mhm.
prelims, the
I don't
prelims,
think they broadcast prelims. I can catch on UFC Fight Pass for sure,
they
but I'm
were
going to watch
all
the.
all amazing. There
Yeah,
was no boring fight on that card. None. It
that's
was
great,
9 hours of
man.
fighting and there was none.
That's insane. I'm going to catch the whole Barboza Burgos fight for sure.
Hmm.
Uh, I think the bout after that, match Snell versus Bontarine. What do you have?
Yeah,
Have you
yeah.
watched? Have you watched a lot of their fights before?
I've watched Chanel and I watched Bontarine take care of Kai Kara France, who Kai
Mm-hmm.
Kara is a hot prospect from Israel Adesanya's gym.
Mm-hmm.
And there were like really, really high hopes when he was fighting Bontarine because, I mean, 125. And again, he's coming from a very popular gym. But, and Bontarine put on a very, very good show against Kai Kara, but uh, this fight was all right. I've not seen much of match now.
Uh, I think firstly, it wasn't supposed to be Bontrine's bout. It was supposed to be Alex Perez, who
It
had
got
to.
announced two
He
days,
couldn't. Yeah,
6 days before.
he couldn't match the weight, and he was really his body couldn't take it, so he didn't want to, like he anyway wouldn't be able to make weight, so he didn't want his body to
Hmm,
suffer more. So that's when Montrine came in beautifully. Again, I think he was already expecting something like this to happen. Like, what is the contingency clause in something like this?
right.
Are
I mean,
like
no,
fighters.
he didn't look as good as he did last time, Bontarine, because Bontarine last time when he came out against Kai Kara, he was shredded. It didn't look like he had fat on him.
But
This
how did
time,
he so much weight?
I have no idea. He probably had something.
This was 135, so
This was 125.
the 125.
He showed
Okay.
up. He showed Bontarine came for the fight at 128, I think.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, they did mention he was overweight. How does
Yeah.
that work?
He submits 20% of his cut of his purse
Okay.
to match Snell.
Okay. So throughout the whole fight, beautiful combinations by that guy. For me, he dominated, and it was very obvious
Yeah, yeah.
where the whole bout was going. DC constantly pointed out that why is the guy switching stances and going for boxing where he's someone who focuses on leg kicks generally.
Hmm.
So that's something I sort of even like was not worried about, but uh, observed that how versatile the fighters are getting now. They want to experiment more and they want to try out and cause more damage and become unpredictable. So that's something that was new for me for sure.
That's that's sort of how that's why a lot of people like our friend Tony Ferguson, because he was the revolutionary wild man. Like he could do, if you wanted to stand with him, he was knocking you out. If you wanted to go to the ground with him, he was submitting you. Now everybody is an MMA fighter. Like I was saying last time, nobody comes in as he was wrestler. It's very rare that you see that now. You see like a finished product come into the MMA, into the UFC. Sorry.
That's great. And now we move on to the fights we've been like really looking forward to for weeks, I guess now.
Right. I mean,
Dariush.
there was Chukagian versus Viviani
Oh
Araújo.
yeah,
Araujo.
yeah. I think I missed one fight. Oh yeah, that's Caitlin Chukagian versus Raju.
Yeah, against Viviani.
What are your
Yeah,
thoughts on that? Again,
Vivi.
these fighters are I've not watched a lot of these fighters, so not much to say. I just noted like what are the whole card right now, so I'm checking. I think I missed it. Yeah.
Caitlin is the best of the rest in that 135 pound
Is she
division.
the same one who had like a very bloated skull after the Valentina Shevchenko fight?
Mm, I don't think so. I think that was Jessica Penne. I think so. I
Could
don't
have
know.
been. Could have been.
Um, she's like Wonderboy was for 170 a few years ago, where nobody wanted to fight him and nobody was good enough to fight him, but he was stuck at number one because he had fought Woodley twice for the title and got and lost both times. Um, I didn't think she would be as impressive as she was. I thought Viviani would be a lot more of a killer because Viviani is this jiu-jitsu insanely powerful stand-up striker. But Chukagian was like amazing. She had a gas tank. She was jabbing in and out, leg kicks, gassed out Viviani.
So for me, the first round, I could really see Araujo probably take control a lot of the fight for the first 1.5 minutes. There was a lot of damage caused. There was a lot of explosive movements that probably caused the fatigue. Because I think, as DC rightly said, a lot of those movements need a lot of hip strength and energy. So that
She
kind of
lost her energy um, on the ground. She had she had a submission and she should have stopped going for the submission after a point because I think she gassed herself out,
but she almost had a guillotine lock for Caitlyn.
which
That was
is
almost there.
I don't think it was as close as people think because Caitlin's a very skinny, long fighter, so she's got that thin, rubbery neck,
Hmm.
which I don't think it was as tight as people thought it was. Because it didn't look like Caitlin was struggling. I think Viviani was just going for something that she should not have, and just destroyed herself.
Do you think Chukwugian looked bigger than Araujo for some reason?
Yeah, she was taller.
Apart from reach advantage, size, because I remember one of the last few cards, like I think it was Joe who mentioned that generally if we have two fighters of fighting who are at the uh, same weight or like are as good as each other, it's more like it's most of the times the ones who's a bigger sized fighter that wins. I don't know how true that is. But I think they mentioned this for
Sort
Jian
of.
versus Izzy.
Yan versus Izzy. Um, Maybe, yeah, of course. Like that's just muscle power, right? So obviously it would make sense. But I that's the thing. I thought Vivi would um, out muscle Chukagian in the clinches and grappling, but apparently Chukagian's insanely strong and managed to hold Viviani off, who's like a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Yeah,
For
very
sure.
impressive.
For sure. Both Chukukian and Bontrain fights for unanimous decision. So there's no doubt about
And
it.
then she pieced her apart in like the second and third round. I saw nothing out of Viviani, even though I had Viviani winning this fight on the weekend, but Chukagian shut her down.
I'd really want to know one of the fights on the undercards, the Valentina Shevchenko's sister fighting. What went down? Did you get a chance to watch that fight?
Yeah, I again, I was surprised that you picked her winning that fight because she is. If you saw her last fight, she was terrible on the ground. She had no offense. She had no defense. It's like she was stuck in her own guard. Um, Again, signs of that started showing in this fight. Andrea, who's an ex-champion in Invicta, um, came out, and she's a very good kickboxer. She came out and she landed a couple good strikes on Antonina, and as soon as that fight went to the ground, I was like, Antonina's lost because her defensive jiu-jitsu is, it doesn't look like it's there. Because immediately Andrea throws up a triangle. I think we had about 3 minutes where Antonina was stuck in the triangle position with her head and her arm locked in triangle. Um, Andrea kept working to tighten up the submission, try to go for an armbar. Nothing, and Antonina did not want to move. She did not want to get out. She was just stuck there, and last 10 seconds of the round, Andrea starts throwing some nasty elbows.
Oof.
And during that whole scuffle, in the last 10 seconds, she grabs her arm, puts it behind her, and straight armbar.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
Must have been really sad for Valentina to watch her be done
I'm
that
pretty
way.
sure. But her sister's not the cream of the crop. I definitely think Andrea Lee definitely needs to go in the top 5. I always thought she could be champ in the UFC after watching her in Invicta. Good to see her finally reach that potential and beat the big names.
I'm going to definitely go and watch all of those prelims as soon as possible. For me,
Amazing
this
prelims.
this entire card wasn't as exciting as probably 261 because the fighters, I've not watched a lot of those fighters before.
You don't know
But
any of these
definitely,
fighters. They had Jacare Souza. They
yeah.
had Lando Venada. All these guys fighting on the prelims. There
I
were
think there was one of the very old fighters. Is that who you're talking about? A very old fighter against someone like comparatively new and who's sort of
Jacare.
lost. I think it's him.
Yeah, Jacare is 41. Yeah.
So I'm going to watch all of those for sure. Even like probably see how Barbosa's last few fights were, and definitely more of Chicagian after what I saw today. What weight class was it? It was bantamweight.
Um, the Andrea Lee versus. Are you asking me about that one?
Yeah. That was, yeah. It no, it
I think that was
was
125.
it was flyweight. It was flyweight.
Oh,
So
so that's 135.
after the like after the today's bout, Chukagian's I think number 4 or number 5. Is
Yeah.
it? So I think a long way, a few more fights until she can get to
Oh
the.
no,
Uh,
she's fought for the title. She fought for the title last year.
at the moment, her ranking's not that great. Right after the fight, there was
Hmm.
like I think wait, I'm going to
They
check
they're
in this.
gonna they're gonna update the rankings tomorrow again.
Mm-hmm.
after all these. I
Okay.
think
Like,
Chukagian she was in the top five, and
mhm.
Arujo was seven.
Oh, as per October 2020, she was number two, but I did see it. I think she is number four or five right now after today's fight. Probably.
Don't say after today's fight. The rankings will be updated tomorrow.
Okay.
Hmm.
Mm, but as I
That
said, a lot of these fighters I've not watched before, so very difficult for me to comment. But I loved what I saw.
was an
Uh,
amazing card. I think it's up there with the Usman card, especially like the prelims and what happened in the earlier fights was
mm,
insane. Jacare's arm breaking, and that was one of the nastiest armbars I've ever seen in my life because you could hear the sound of Jacare's bone break.
mm.
Oh, nasty armbar. And the guy, I think, I forget his name, his opponent, he was calling out and saying that he's a better grappler than Jacare before the fight. And everyone was just like, how do you think you can make a statement like that? And my God, he showed it. He showed it. He dominated Jacare with that nasty armbar.
Insane, insane. Definitely going to watch a lot of those.
Prelims,
This was prelims, and there was like a card before that as well, right? Did you like
the
watch all of those fights?
the early prelims as well. Yeah, I'm a true
Okay,
fight fan, man.
that's great to know. I am still newer to this compared to you are, so probably I'm going to get into it for sure. And because like it's just beautiful how every card there's a new fighter I'm introduced to who I'd really like to watch about, and that's
Mm,
when I go and check out UFC Fight Pass. So like they have like all the older festival, like the older fights as well.
right.
So
Yeah.
there's just so much to consume. Coming to your favorite Tony Ferguson and
Daniel,
Dariush's fight.
that was a sad
Benil
fight.
Dariush. Uh, I really want to point out, like, uh, just like keeping apart the fact that Tony's obviously achieved the status that he has and he's loved by all the fight fans. The iconic expression by the whole commentary table that's there, like DC, Joe Rogan, and John Yannick, like going absolutely
Mm,
bonkers, was to a Dariush knockout of, I think, Drakkar
yeah,
Close, however you pronounce
that
it.
fight was insane with Dariush and Close. That was one of the fights of the year last year.
I really like to watch. I really liked watching Dariush because he was also a very unconventional sort fighter, very technical on the ground.
Mm,
Throughout the fight today, like he had a master game plan. That was
yeah.
absolutely genius of him to control Tony that way. Firstly, DC pointed out. DC does, like keeps dropping these bombshells because I think out of the entire table, his would be the most like valid technical analysis according to me
Hmm.
because he's been there, he's achieved the GOAT status. So
Mm,
he did point out that for the fact that Dariush is already so technical on the ground, plus he does realize that Tony's been unpredictable throughout his career, and he's like it seems to he seems to not have his fundamentals right the way Dariush probably had.
that's something that Dean Thomas said, not DC.
Okay.
Um, that's that's not how he framed it. You're comparing two artists, man. Uh, what he said was Tony's relied his whole life on um, having that wild card, unconventional status, but um, during a fight like this, when especially after the first round, when um, your ankle gets popped out because of a heel hook, or I think something popped in his knee because you could. Benil in the post-fight interview said that he heard something pop, and he kind of made this face. Tony made this face that like something did pop, and then he went back and like after the pain was over, he completely ignored it. But um, what Dean meant was like after all that struggle, you've got to be fundamental with your approach for the next two rounds. Um, I don't think, yeah, Tony was not on that at all. I think somebody came out with the stat in the post fight as well, saying that in the last three fights or in the last 30 minutes that Tony's fought for, he's thrown only around 30 strikes or something like that, which is those are not 155 numbers. So I don't know whether it's something to do with his confidence or the lack of athleticism that he's having with the coming of age, but he looked like he was there for a hungry young Dariush to mop up, because Dariush owned that fight.
Entirely. I I was quite shook at the fact that it was only 3 rounds. I think generally even main events are supposed to be 5 rounds, right?
That was a co-main event.
Yeah. So I think like okay, but whatever, 3 rounds.
No, only they were only giving that special treatment to Nate Diaz and Leon Edwards,
Why is that?
because they're special fighters. I mean, Nate is.
Hmm. Dariush like did a great job. I think like keeping everything aside, I think it wasn't. It was more of what Dariush did than Tony didn't.
Exactly.
Because Dariush had a master plan. He knew he had to keep Tony on the ground. There was so much grappling happening, and there were like that heel hook, of course, in the round two, and he just had it under control. By the time it's round three, we saw him control more of the fights, but initially there were just so many attempts. It was painful to watch Tony be done
Even in
that
the
way.
even in the second round, when they came out standing, you could see how much it affected. That full twist of
Oh,
the heel
yeah,
hook
yeah.
affected Tony because he couldn't stand right on his left leg. It looked insanely off.
They this did say it, like the whole commentary table did say it. To me, it didn't look as much. Probably also, I haven't watched a lot of those heel hook sort of submissions before.
It looked very off.
But how do you identify or how do you analyze that? Like, what's the difference?
He didn't want to put weight on that foot. Even if you, like, subconsciously you will step down completely on your foot, but there's a part in your body blocking you because of the pain and the uncomfort. He didn't want his foot didn't plant down other than his toes. His toes would just touch the ground and then he'd be back up.
Hmm.
The only thing that worked for Tony in that fight was to be on the ground, and unfortunately he was on the wrong end of it, where his back was on the mat.
All the trash talk before the press con, all the hyping this fight up, I feel
Mm.
so bad. Like what has happened, but all the
I
credit to
mean,
Dariush.
the
That guy came
UFC's
in. That guy came in with a plan,
yeah,
beautifully implemented, and got the job done. Unanimous
Dariush
decision.
deserves a top five fight now. I hope he gets a chance, a stab at the title at some point, because he's someone I've been watching like do the fight night circuit, do the prelim circuit for years now. He's been one of those run of the mill fighters, and now he's got to be in the top five of the most brutal division in the UFC. It's good. It's good to see fresh faces. Totally
Of
new
course,
wave for the lightweight division.
even for someone like me who's not watched the like UFC for a very very long time, there's still like I would say every year there's like a fresh face being introduced, and there's always like a change of the whole roster or the top 10. There's just and even like
I
every
wouldn't
division
say
has.
every year, but I'd say this year more than ever, because you've lost Tony out of your big names. You've lost Khabib. You've lost Connor, who's not competing in the top three, top
Elite
fives. Yeah,
form that he was.
yeah. Even Dustin, he's choosing not to do that, but I'm pretty sure Dustin fits there like easily. But a lot of your names are like kind of not there. So,
Where does
and yeah,
Gaethje, according to you, fall into all of this? Like after the
uh,
loss to Khabib, I have not really heard like there's
I'm
been
surprised they didn't fight for him.
yeah,
I I
there's no conversation at all about where what's he doing next.
I really thought that they'd make um, Oliveira versus Chandler, and you had Poirier versus Connor. and I thought Gaethje was going to fight someone in the top five, maybe someone like Islam, or maybe he'd fight Kevin Lee or someone like that in the
Mm-hmm.
top five of 155. But I don't know. I hope he's there in the top five. I mean, in the discussion for the next title fight.
He is in the top five for sure. I think they did project all the rankings post every fight, so I'm going to go back and check even for Chukagian. But definitely Geji is, I think, third or fourth in the whole rankings for lightweight. But
Hmm.
I think Dariush is getting up, like getting there, top five soon.
Yeah, he'll
Hopefully,
get.
he's
Tony
got a
was
good
five.
win streak going as well.
Tony was five, so Darius should be somewhere top six, maybe.
Hmm. Great fight. On a very conventional note, if it had been someone who's not analyzed the fight or who's not watched a lot of the Tony fights before, would give it like a very Jorge versus Usman one
Hmm.
boring sort of fight title. But for me, I loved watching Dariush
I
implement
don't
that game
think.
plan.
I don't even think it was boring grappling. Really, it wasn't your old um, take down and sit on top of the guy. It was good grappling. It was like very aggressive grappling. You could see he was going for submissions and.
The control aspect is where I would see the audience sort of cools down, and that's where,
Hmm.
because everyone, especially who's watched Tony, would want to watch a straight up brawl happen, right?
Hmm.
And that a lot of the fans didn't get to watch that, so probably again, like, it's all an
Right.
assumption of how an audience would perceive. Because personally talking, even how I would perceive a fight a couple of years ago versus how I would perceive it right now is a lot more different, and I
Hmm.
sort of love that also. But again, it's very difficult to kind of have, like, empathize with someone else who's watching it,
Right. Right.
everyone has
Right.
a
Right.
very subjective view towards the fight. And
Hmm.
until when it's like a very clear, like how, again, moving on to the Oliveira versus Chandler fight, there it was like very clear what really happened. So
Hmm.
there was no sort of dispute in conversation, in perception.
Hmm.
Moving straight to it, I loved Michael. I've been watching a lot of his highlights over the last few weeks. His bout with Eddie Alvarez, the way he lost to Pitbull, Patricio Pitbull,
Hmm.
other guy from Bellator. Love the damage he can cause for his opponents. Love the power that guy has. His personality is championship material for sure.
Hmm.
So I had a lot of expectation for him, and he delivered. He definitely delivered. Round one, owned Oliveira most of the times. Okay, I'll come to that. I'll come to that point. I can
Owned
really
is a
observe.
strong word.
I know. I'll tell you about the whole the reaction you had. I expected that. I'll tell you what I really feel. Throughout the first round, what people don't probably notice, Oliveira has been a technical fighter for the longest you can see.
Hmm.
So a lot of the strikes that he lands are probably causing the equal amount of damages. But if you see from a very, I would say, again, like a not very non-technical point of view, you can see how Oliveira was shocked, or like probably couldn't take the pressure that Chandler was putting up. So round one for me was definitely Chandler owning it, Oliveira just controlling it. So I think saying that he owned the round one is a fair deal for me.
Mm, again, I don't understand what you mean by owned, first of all. But Chandler was on the ground. His back was taken by Oliveira. Oliveira had a close submission in,
But do
and
you know
towards
how
the
much
end,
reversal?
to
No one has reversed Oliveira like that in the last few fights. Firstly, when it was such a struggle for him to get that rear naked choke, he couldn't. That guy had the strength to pick Oliveira up, slammed him on the ground, kept going, no gassing up,
he
even
he
after
he
delivering such explosive
he
shots.
knew. No, I think that he knew. He even called out post fight. He said that getting up and slamming Oliveira on his back was a terrible decision
Hmm.
because um, when he did that slam, Oliveira still had a body triangle on him. So
Okay.
his stomach was even more compressed,
Oh my God. Okay.
and he got himself stretched out in a worse position. How he got out of it was crazy though. Very smart, smaller guy jiu-jitsu, I would say, because Oliveira has those octopus like long arms,
Yeah.
and Chandler just flips him over, gets back into guard, and then that's when Chandler started overtaking.
Very entertainer fighter for sure. The pressure he
And
puts was
then,
just like fun to watch.
hmm, and then like towards the end, I was like, how the hell is Oliveira surviving? Because he was throwing bombs.
And one
Um,
shot got his eye. One shot really got Oliveira's eye and was
yeah.
bleeding.
Yeah. No, the cut came from the slam. The cut came from the rear naked choke slam.
Okay.
That here. Oliveira was already cut by the time they stood up again.
Hmm.
Then the one thing I was like, Chandler, I know you got out of a submission on the ground, but when you rocked him so badly, why are you jumping back into his guard? Terrible decision, in my opinion. He should have just stood him up.
You're talking about the end of round one, or you're talking about
Yeah,
round two?
end of round one when Chandler was on top.
Like Oliveira firstly didn't want to get up. There were moments where Oliveira was down. I think Chandler throughout just didn't have the patience to sort of control the fight. He wanted to just keep unloading those dynamite
Dude,
shots. That's
have
how it
you
looked for sure.
have you ever heard of Fabricio Verdum versus Fedor?
I
You know
haven't
what
watched
happened in
the.
that fight?
No, I don't.
So two of the greatest heavyweights ever. Um, Fedor lands a punch on Verdum. Verdum goes down. He falls on his back, and he just sits there. Verdum just sits there. Fedor runs and dives in, gets caught in a submission like that.
Oh my god.
So think about this. If Chandler, I mean, it could have happened to him. He's kind of lucky it didn't happen in the first round, where he dives into the guy who has the most submissions in the UFC history, more than more than the Gracies. You jump into his guard. I thought that was a terrible decision.
That's what I said. It's like getting into a sport fight with a knife. If it like watching a lot of the older corner fights, if it was someone like a corner, they have that persona to them where that they just move back, realize what's happening, and like stand
Simple,
up. I want to
yeah.
fight you.
He
Like
was. I
do
think
that. If
Chandler
you're a
was too
striker, go
excited.
back, ask him to stand up, strike,
Yeah.
and not get into.
Chandler saw the gold too soon. He thought he was too
That's
close to the gold.
exactly what I was going to say. Like round
He's,
two, he got him. He got excited. That's again, it's a very layman perspective of sorts, and I'm not like a fighter to comment
I
on that.
mean, you're
But he
human.
seemed to have yeah, we're humans. But he seemed to have gotten excited and gone again for those power shots, and then that's what was done.
He
Technical
he
excellence by Oliveira.
he thought Oliveira was still hurt in the second, which is why he came out with those crazy hooks. He was just throwing overhands. And the simplest way for anyone to counter that, for anyone throwing bombs, is to throw a check left hook. And Oliveira caught him clean. That left hook was perfect. Perfect. If you go back and watch the fight, I must have watched that left hook like 5 or 6 times. I can't get over it. It was perfect. That's what rocked Chandler. That's what.
Technical excellence. It's all about technique. And surprisingly, even Chandler, I think in round one, attempted a guillotine. Right? Did you catch that?
Yeah,
It was a
yeah, yeah.
very weak impasse of sorts, but he tried that, and it was.
I was thinking.
I loved how Chandler was at it. Like Chandler was at it, and if he had to keep on going for round five, I don't know how the fight would have gone. Uh, like with the amount of strength and the foot, like with the stamina that's required to have that many explosive shots and that many probably power moves landed in the first few rounds and still survive the last few rounds. Like, how does
Hmm.
that work? I have no idea. So it had to be an early stoppage for sure. But unfortunately or fortunately, it went Oliveira's way. I mean, no one deserves it more than that guy in the UFC, considering he's been fighting for over a decade and has had 18.
If if
How
you've
how
seen
many
Oliveira's
fights?
career,
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know how many fights he's fought with the UFC, but
I think it's 28.
he used to fight at 145, and he used
Yeah.
to kill himself to make 145. When he first came to 155, I was like, how is this guy not in the top five already? Because he was finishing people standing off of his back on top. He's getting flying arm bars and shit. Man,
He can
Oliveira is
strike,
the
he
man.
can submit, he can
Yeah,
do
but
everything.
I still think he's the fact that he got knocked down to. I love Charles Oliveira. Don't get me wrong at all,
Hmm.
but he tasted 155 power, and it didn't taste good to him.
He, I mean, I think it was even his bout with Tony was 155, right?
Yeah, but Tony, you're talking about a different Tony.
Probably you'd know more, like considering you
Like
fought
two
watched so
years
many of.
ago,
Firstly, I want to know why is Tony a fighter's fighter? Like, why is he loved so much? Because
because
absolutely brash personality throughout the press conferences and even like throughout the fight. If you've seen, he sort of disrespected Dariush in the second round when he came for a
hmm,
handshake, and even after the fight when they're like supposed to announce the results and like the Dariush's arm supposed to be raised. Tony was right in the center of the octagon and he wouldn't want to move.
oh, I think that was just miscommunication. What happened in the
Probably.
production team and whatnot. But I think what was your exact question again?
How is he loved by everyone?
Why is he loved? Okay.
Why is he loved? No, not even why. Okay, where does that love? Okay, he's a fighter's fighter. That's what they call him, right? And
What that term comes from?
yeah, where that term comes from. A and second,
Uh,
after having such a personality, even when you saw Connor, he was always like that in a very, I would say, in a very neutral way of sorts. He went all out and would put his opponent down, but it came out very neutral from an audience perspective. Tony was straight up just rude.
uh, I don't want to talk about Tony's personality because
I mean,
he's
you did tell me that you don't enjoy watching him talk. You loved watching him
I
fight.
see. I don't know his personality because he's had issues in his household with his wife and stuff like that. So
Oh,
I I try not to take too much of what he says in actuality. But he came out with one of the best lines this weekend. Dana White privilege.
100%,
Best lines probably of the year.
100%. I would agree. Dana White privilege.
but
Chandler comes in straight to the top. He was a backup for the whole Khabib and Gaethje fight. Then
yeah.
goes on, beats Hooker, and suddenly fighting for the title. But he did prove that he's worthy of a title shot for me. That guy was explosive throughout. He's championship materials. He's championship material. I
Um,
can see him become a champion in the next few years. 100%.
you're comparing him. See, the only reason people will say that Chandler doesn't deserve it, I mean, I watched him in Bellator. He's amazing. I saw both his fights with Benson Henderson. Great fights, epic fights. Um, the only thing is, anyone who's in the 155 division in the UFC has gone through hell. Has gone through absolute hell. Tony had to go through 12 fights of winning to get no title. Charles Oliveira had to go through 14 fights of winning to get a title. You see what I mean? Dariush has had a career full of no big fights. He finally gets a big fight. 155 is the hardest division that I mean it's the division that nothing comes to you, is what the perception has been built as, you know. It's even if you see Khabib's brother, Islam,
Hmm.
he's not getting nobody wants to fight him, but he still has to go through the 155 hellscape because it's the hardest division in the UFC. I don't think any division's as crazy as 155 or will ever be.
Agreed.
So
And that's where Dana White privilege comes in.
that's where that little bit of spoon feeding in the general perception exists.
At the end of the day, it's a business, so I don't blame anyone.
Yeah, but it's also lives and livelihoods and families.
But Michael Chandler, for me, is championship material. You can't deny that after today's
He is
performance.
he's been a champ. He's always been a champ.
A
Even
UFC champion material.
outside of the UFC. See, being a UFC champ is totally different. There's a lot that goes into it. It's not. It's a lot about circumstance. Like what I was telling you earlier this week. I think Tony is for me is among the top what if stories in the MMA because he did most of it, but the main two things, Conor and Khabib, didn't happen. So what if he fought them in his prime? We still don't know. If you tell me that like he got out wrestled and all by these last two guys, I'm still going to say 3 years ago. What if
Probably, for sure. What's next for Chandler according to you?
Chandler should fight Justin? Chandler versus Gaethje, and because again, in my opinion, when um, a fight ends like Oliveira and Chandler's did, where Chandler got Oliveira almost knocked out in the first round to Oliveira knocking Chandler out in the second round. I don't see. I mean, it's perfect grounds for another rematch. I don't think it's that decisive where you come out and say like, okay, no, Chandler can never fight Oliveira again. It makes no sense because he knocked him out.
Agreed. But I think the next in line for a title shot is supposed to be Dustin because they did mention Dustin was offered the fight before against Chandler for the title, but chose not to. He wanted to compete against Conor. So I really feel if he ends up beating Conor, he's going to fight next for the title. Yes, I agree. Michael Chandler and Justin Gaethje is supposed to fight next. I would also love to watch it purely because it's going to be a major brawl considering both have so much power in their fists. I think you've muted yourself.
Yep.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, bombs galore between those two. So that fight can not be fun.
There's some issue with your audio. Did you like disconnect your earphones or something?
Yep.
The battery is dead. Do you have any earphones to use of sorts? Okay, no problem. We'll cut the background disturbance out in the post probably. Yeah, you were saying?
Um, I think both of them is bombs. Like that is must see TV.
Dynamite and fists, right?
That's $60. Like that's PPV just worth it right there immediately.
For sure. But what really happens if Conor wins the Dustin versus Conor 3?
That throws things off because then maybe Conor immediately just gets the title shot straight after that.
Dana White privilege.
Dana White privilege.
Agreed. But honestly, like apart from everything, the last fight was it for me. I was like, who the hell can sleep after something like that, right? I just woken up, similar thing as last weekend, not slept the whole night, wake up immediately in a couple of hours to watch the whole fight card, and until the last fight, okay, it's fine, great fights, and then suddenly, oh my god, what the hell has just happened in the round two?
That whole fight, that whole card was insane. That whole card has just drained me for today.
And I loved how our Discord servers finally started to become very active, and there was if you open it now, there was so much conversation happening during the fight. I'm definitely going to have a live channel so that none of the spoilers are revealed to anyone. But it was, I can see people get more and more excited every week, and the next few fights are just insane. I think next weekend there's a big bantamweight bout happening, right?
Font versus Garbrandt, yeah.
Yes, that's a no audience Apex Center sort of fight. But the next major events, 263 Marvin Vittori versus Israel Adesanya. That's 12 June.
Yeah.
Okay. Undercard has Figueiredo versus Moreno 2. Insane fight of the year last year. There's Leon Edwards versus Nate Diaz. There's also Bilal Muhammad fighting on the card. That's something interesting to watch. Definitely excited for it. And this whole month has just been madness for a fight fan. I don't know what else is to come yet. Probably they'd have even there's a bunch of great boxing bouts happening. Let's sort of plan a conversation around that. We definitely get there's definitely scope for us to talk about more than just MMA right now, and probably understand more sports because I feel it's just it's an exciting time for combat sports right now, and people are just loving it, especially after the whole of last year when that was probably one of the only sports that was fully functional.
Yeah.
And with the audiences back, it's just a different game out there.
Yeah, it really is. It's weird with the audience now. Yeah.
Agreed. Anyway, this was, I think, a great conversation. We'll continue for sure in our next episode.
Good fight week.
Good fight week. Loved it. Peacefully going to go off to sleep on a Sunday night. Very hectic week ahead for everyone, I'm sure, and just go to kick ass.
Yeah.